When you're occupied by a power, that power squeezes you more and more and more as time goes on. And when one of their strategies fails, they bring in another strategy, and which always happens to be more brutal than the previous one. So after August 19, what changed was there was a kind of an agreement, supposed agreement between the Maharaja and India, that there are going to be only certain areas which India will control and certain other areas will be controlled by the Kashmiris, and this will be pending a resolution. The right of that will be given to the Kashmiri public, and that was ratified 18 times by the United Nations through the 18 resolutions that we have now, giving the right of self-determination to the Kashmiris. So what they did on that day, they took that away as well. And more than the Article 370, which was part of Indian constitution, was a sideline, but the most important part, which was 35A, which preserved the identity of Kashmiris. Because nobody other than the Kashmiris could buy land in Kashmir. If a person married somebody else other than a Kashmiri, they would lose what was known as, what can loosely be described as a citizenship of Kashmir, which was known as the disciple or the person belonging to that Kashmir. And that was very important. Why? Because when you're fighting for your identity, when you're fighting for your freedom, then this exclusion criteria is very, very important to preserve that. So that was taken away. That was taken away on August the 5th, 2019. To put things in perspective, we've got about 8 million people who are controlled, and that's the best word I can find, by 1 million army personnel. And these 8 million people are men, women, and children who are unarmed. And it's the biggest and the vast jail that you can think of, a prison that you can think of, where there are 8 million people in this camp and 1 million army who are fully sophisticated weapons. They are controlling them. A few miles, or sometimes even less than a mile, you have a bunker, a proper bunker, a war bunker, which stops you all the time. If you come out of your house, they stop you, and God forbid, if you have forgotten your own identity card, that's it, you're gone. Because you're a terrorist. Then you are a terrorist because you don't belong, you don't have an identity card. Other thing that they have done, that there was very little space for political activities. They've taken that away completely. Even those politicians which were hailing Indian occupation, a couple of families, the Abdullah families and the Mufti families, even they have been now imprisoned. Now they're releasing them slowly, but there's no space for them. The third space, which we call the third sector over here, which is the coalition of civil societies. The head of coalition of civil societies, Khurram Parvez, whose job is to fight for civil liberties, from domestic abuse right up to the human rights abuse, he has been put behind the bar over the last few months under terrorism charges. A person who has been awarded and celebrated by UN, by Amnesty International, is a terrorist in Kashmir because he has said something about the largest democracy on earth. He has said something about largest democracy on earth, so he's a terrorist now. He's behind the bars. Just yesterday, one of the journalists uploaded on his site, on his website, about the abuse committed by one of the Indian army. He has been taken into jail since yesterday under terrorism charge. And everything is terrorism. You speak about the human rights abuses, you become a terrorist. They are completely squeezing any space for even words, for even saying about the oppression. We've got 18 resolutions of UN, the most strongest body, or thought to be the strongest body anyway. And then you got the Kashmiris fighting for their right of self-determination. They're not fighting for something else. They're not saying to you, we want to have something which is something untenable or something which is not a right of all human beings. They're just asking for something which everybody agrees. And we in Scotland know this better than anybody else, that the right of self-determination, the right to choose your own destiny, is one of the fundamental rights. Cannot be taken away from anybody, should be given to everybody, should be agreed with everybody. But India does not feel any pressure at all. They're feeling no pressure because it's the largest, one of the largest markets for everybody. Markets for selling weapons, markets for selling goods. Cheap labor comes out of there. All your call centers are based over there. Everybody is wanting to shake hands with India, and especially the Modi government, which we know is the fastest government. They declared openly in their gathering that we are calling for mass murder of Muslims in India and Christians. And media didn't even report that. World is talking about human rights and world is talking about civilization, but where is it?
It's easy to forget living in this country in Scotland that not everyone across the world enjoys the same political and democratic freedoms that we enjoy so freely here. And with those freedoms that we have here comes a responsibility for us to stand out and speak in solidarity of those that are oppressed. And that's what we're doing here today, to try and get an education and a background on the situation in the ground. So today's day, Kashmir Day or Kashmir Solidarity Day, actually started in 1990. Sadly, it's still sorely needed, as mentioned by our first speaker, that we still need to take out a day to remember what's going on in Kashmir, quite sadly.
There are many politicians that across the political divide really believe that international politics is really important to shape. And the question of Kashmir is a very, very important question for politicians, Scottish politicians and British politicians. One of my passions in my life, as well as representing the people of Glasgow, is many of the international struggles around the world. And although I've still a lot to learn about the plight of the people of Kashmir, I know a beautiful part of the world, one of the more disputed territories of the world, but one of the parts of the world that is least talked about of the international struggles. One of my big passions in life, I chair the cross-party group on Palestine, and the plight of the Palestinians is close to my heart. And there are a lot of parallels, and you've heard it already. Parallels of living under occupation, living under a regime that is respected by parts of the world and never questioned about its behaviour. I'm pleased to say that Amnesty International, a very controversial report, but a very long overdue report, highlighting that the people who live in occupied Palestine, they live in a regime which is divided and lives under an apartheid system. That's uncomfortable for many people. But those of us who've been involved for many years know this is the truth. There are many people who speak out about Gaza and they speak out about the occupation. In fact, probably Palestine is the most talked about international struggle. It's probably the most covered conflict in the world. And that's why I'm delighted to be here to talk about the issue of occupied Kashmir, because we know that there has been a security and communications lockdown. And so we don't really know what's been happening. And if it wasn't for speakers like you've just heard, we would have no knowledge. I mean, even searching the press today, even on one of my favourite outlets, Al Jazeera and other, English speaking of course, for me, it's very hard to get any day-to-day coverage of what the people of Kashmir are going through. But we do know they are suffering. We do know they need our solidarity. And they do need to know that we are talking here in Glasgow about their lives and about the need for action. The United Nations, we've heard, passed many resolutions. But what does it really mean? What does it really mean if there's been no change? Well, one thing I'm clear about is that India does need to be confronted about the future of Kashmir. It does need to be confronted about the daily lives of people who live there, who are denied basic rights to live in peace. I too believe it's up to the people of Kashmir to make a determination on how they want to live, who they want to be governed by. But what I do know is that they want the lives that all of us lead. They want peaceful lives. and they want the violence to go away. They want the uncertainty in their future to be removed. It is one of the most militarised parts of the world, but yet, as I said earlier, we don't have many politicians talking about it.
You will not be surprised to hear me say that I support the right of the people of Kashmir to self-determination, that they should have that choice for how they want to live their own future, and that choice has been denied to them for far, far too long. And we know in this country that it's a right that we have had and that we continue to have the right to self-determination, and we should not deny it to anybody else. I also believe that the UK government has a very special responsibility to the people of Kashmir. They were part of creating this situation, and they should be part of trying to resolve it, working with the governments of Pakistan and of India to try and resolve this peacefully, because the last thing that needs to happen is any more bloodshed and any more terror for the people that live there. They should be allowed to get on with their lives in peace and live together in the way that they see fit. There is recent news of another journalist being arrested in Kashmir, Fahad Shah, of the Kashmir Walla online news outlet. And it's incredibly worrying that we don't get the chance to have all of the news that we need coming out of Kashmir. How can we know how to react, how to respond, how to support the people of Kashmir best if the journalists that are reporting that have to do so in fear that they cannot tell the stories of the people that are living there, they cannot tell the stories of what is actually going on the ground if they fear arrest, as Fahad Shah has been under anti-terror laws. And of course he is not the first journalist to be, and I'm certain as this goes on he will not be the last. Syed Gill arrested last month for sharing a tweet. As something as simple that we would all take for granted as sharing a tweet, people are risking arrest for so doing. And it's only by raising awareness of what's actually going on, using our opportunities to do so in Parliament, to ask ministers to raise these issues, that we can continue to push for the self-determination that the people of Jammu and Kashmir so desperately desire, and the freedoms that we all have to come together, to challenge governments where we wish to write things in the press and to tell the stories of the people. All of these things which we take for granted, the people of Jammu and Kashmir should have the ability to do.
Given the grim situation that Irfan alluded to, this isn't a time to celebrate, but given that grim situation, there is still hope. Because it's a constant of anti-colonial struggles against the most brutal occupation. In Algeria, the French killed 1 million. In Vietnam, the Americans killed 3 million people before they were defeated. Apartheid was defeated in South Africa, and it was brutal and bloody. Militarily, they defeated Nelson Mandela's ANC. No question about it. And the same in every other anti-colonial struggle. In Algeria, the French won militarily, and then they were defeated. In Vietnam, the Americans always won. Every battle they won pretty much, and then they were defeated. It's not the militarily powerful side which wins in a colonial struggle. It's the side which is determined to continue, to persevere, and which evokes worldwide solidarity, which can be victorious, even although it's not a contest militarily. 1 million Indian soldiers, this is saturation. It's not going to be possible to defeat them militarily. But this is a bestial regime. The enemy is not India. The enemy is a regime which privileges Hindus over every other section of the population, which brutally attacks a loving couple, some of them may be Hindu or Muslim, and beats people up and murders people because they love across the sectarian dividing line. This is a regime whose Prime Minister earned his political spurs in a massacre of Muslims in his region before he became the national Prime Minister. This regime is bestial, is brutal, and needs to be and people need to be told how this is. I think the similarity between Palestine and Kashmir is many. There are some differences, but there are many, many parallels. But what I think brings them together is that they're both regimes of naked violence. I mean, in Britain we have a problem of racism. Of course we do, it's terrible. But you have votes. the government has to conciliate you or dupe you or fool you or win you over to silence or demoral. It doesn't. Political fights are not won by guns and helicopter gunships. It's a political fight. But in Kashmir and in Palestine, it is brutal, naked violence by a regime of religious supremacy against a mass population. And we can win. Campaigners in Oldham against the arming of Israel protested against the Elbit Arms Company for week after week after week, bloody red paint on the windows and the doorsteps, occupying the roof of the company many, many times over, finding the office of the company, the landlord rather, in a city centre, and protesting there. And Elbit has withdrawn from Oldham. They have sold up their stake. An arms company whose executives went to bed every night and kissed their children and then sold weapons to kill other children. That company has been roundly defeated in Oldham. Elbit was an Israeli arms company. It sold arms to the BJP government in India. This is a victory for all of us. And I think it shows the way forward. We are winning. I spoke a few weeks ago in Glasgow to somebody from Oakland, California. Now, this is California, USA. No Israeli ships have been able to unload in Oakland port since 2014. The dockers turned them away. 2014 was the year of a terrible massacre against Palestinians. 2,200 butchered, 551 children. British government then responded by escalating its arms sales to Israel. That year, I've got a Canadian passport as well. That same year, the Canadian government virtually criminalised boycott, divestment and sanctions. That same year, the dockers in Vancouver turned away an Israeli ship. Today is the biggest port on the American Pacific. Israeli ships cannot go there. They can go there, they can berth, but they'll never be unloaded, and the dockers always send them out. There was a picket there of 2,000 people, not dockers, people from the community, and the dockers supported them and turned away the Israeli ships. Just a few miles from here is the Edinburgh International Festival, the biggest arts festival in the world. Since 2014, the Israelis have not been able to send any visitors to that, any performers to that festival. And it hurts. You can read the Israeli press how much it hurts that they know that they are a polecat state, a pariah state. Well before Amnesty registered this by saying that it was an apartheid state. And by the way, apartheid means a crime against humanity. It is the most serious crime in the canon of international law. And Israel suffered another severe defeat with this Amnesty report. Zionism does not equal Jew. Hatred of Zionism and injustice does not equal hatred of Jews. Nothing like it. Hatred of Hindu supremacy in India is not hostility to Hindus, most of whom have never harmed a Muslim. It is a hatred and a hostility to a system. Let us educate people about that system because it is an anachronism. People don't like 1 million soldiers against a civilian population. They don't like the massacre of Muslims or people of any religion by a regime which is egging on further massacres. Israel is already a pariah state. Oakland Port, Cochin Port on the east coast of India also turned away Israeli ships as well. So did Scandinavian ports. The road to victory and freedom for the monstrously violated people of Kashmir and Palestine lies in organising even a small number of people. We are the people we've been waiting for.
It is a duty upon all of us to stand up against that carnage. The UN Charter of Human Rights, which is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was passed in 1948 in Paris, now adopted almost all the member states of the United Nations. The first right there is the right to life. Then the next right is freedom. Both rights, both fundamental and basic rights enshrined in the Universal Charter of Human Rights, have been snatched from the people of Kashmir. There is no sanctity of life. and there's no sanctity of honor. They kidnap the women and ladies from their houses, and they rape them at their doorsteps in front of their families, and they use the rape as the weapon of war. People cannot step out of their houses. Previously, people died, the sick and ailing people died without any treatment and access to the treatment, the hospitals or doctors. And imagine the extent of brutality, that they were not allowed to take the dead bodies to the graveyard. They had to bury their deer in their courtyards. If this is not enough to knock our conscience, to stand up for them, then I doubt we have perhaps lost any last tinge of humanity left in our hearts and conscience. Desmond Tutu said once, if you are not standing up against the oppressor and you think you are impartial, you are secular, you are not so, you are actually siding the oppressor and helping him to do and carry on what they are doing. We need to look at ourselves. Is it the case with us? If so, then we need to change. This country is a democratic country anyway, which gives us a chance to take your stance from personal level to the highest level in the country. If we lobby our politicians, if we lobby our academics, if we lobby our journalists, and we form the opinions, we bring the people onto our sides and pressurize the government as well to stand by their commitment which they made in the United Nations in the form of 18 United Nations Security Council resolutions, to stand by that and get that implemented, put the pressure on India. We need to realize our duty, and we need to do this duty if we think we are humans, then we need to stand by the oppressed communities for the restoration of their human rights.
Pakistan remains deeply concerned about the worsening human rights and security situation in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, which continues to be under military and police siege. Extrajudicial killing of innocent Kashmiris continue with impunity. Hardly a day passes without any news of a fake encounter or a so-called cordon and search operation by the Indian occupation forces. Since 1st of January of this year, at least 24 Kashmiris have been martyred in this unabated reign of terror. Government of Pakistan, our missions abroad have been arranging program on this day. We will continue to arrange such programs to show our support to the Kashmiri brothers and sisters in this trying time. It's not only the current regime that is a troublesome phenomena for our Kashmiri struggle, but it's a long saga of more than 70 years that has taken its toll. It's a whole generation that has been through to this reign of terror. But after the steps taken by the Indian government, 5th of August 2019, things and status quo has been changed, and now the special status of Jammu and Kashmir has been disturbed. The UN resolution on this issue are being ignored by Indian government, as well as sidetracked by the world power, and we expect that the world committee should take notice of that and should come up. It's not only a political problem between Pakistan and India, but also a human rights issue.
ए वादिये कश्मीर बदलेगी बहुत जल्द, यकीन है तेरी तकदीर, बदलेगी बहुत जल्द, यकीन है तेरी तकदीर। ए वादिये कश्मीर, सुन ए वादिये कश्मीर, हर सच्चे मुसलमान का लहू खौल उठा है, हर सच्चे मुसलमान का लहू खौल उठा है। कश्मीर का हर बच्चा भी अब बोल उठा है, कश्मीर का हर बच्चा भी अब बोल उठा है। लिखेंगे तेरे माथे पे आज़ादी की तहरीर, लिखेंगे तेरे माथे पे आज़ादी की तहरीर। ए वादिये कश्मीर, सुन ए वादिये कश्मीर। और कितने भी सितम ढाले पछताएगा एक दिन, कितने भी सितम ढाले پچھتائے گا ایک دن، اس عالم ہستی سے بھی مٹ جائے گا ایک دن، وہ جس نے بنایا ہے تجھے درد کی تصویر، اے وادی کشمیر سن اے وادی کشمیر۔ اور ماؤں کی دعاؤں سے جواں آگے بڑھیں گے، ماؤں کی دعاؤں سے جواں آگے بڑھیں گے، جاں باز یہ تیرے تجھے لے کر ہی رہیں گے، جاں باز یہ تیرے تجھے لے کر ہی رہیں گے، کھل جائے گی ایک دن یہ تیرے پاؤں کی زنجیر، کھل جائے گی ایک دن یہ تیرے پاؤں کی زنجیر، اے وادی کشمیر سن اے وادی کشمیر، بدلے گی بہت جلد یقین ہے تیری تقدیر، اے وادی کشمیر سن اے وادی کشمیر، انشاءاللہ۔ تھینک یو۔